Does the idea of preparing for an upcoming presentation or talk make you cringe or make you nervous, or maybe you want to clean the entire house before you even consider sitting down and preparing? I know that this type of work is not always the most exciting and often we'll procrastinate, especially if we are nervous about speaking, but that's even more reason to have a great workflow to get you prepared for your upcoming talk. Whether this is in person or virtual, being prepared is definitely something that you want to do, but also you want a system that you can rely on when it actually comes to the day that you present. Now, I have actually talked about preparing before, and I do use Notion, but recently, like we're talking weeks, I changed my approach and I kind of love it. So that's what I'm going to talk about today is what am I doing differently? How can you start to incorporate this? And why is Notion a great tool? We're going to talk about all of that today because it's all about being presentation ready with Notion. And if you've never seen me before, my name is Kat and I help people to create more professional and engaging online presentations. And I recently just did an in-person event, and this new format that I'm using, this new approach, was really helpful for this in-person talk as well. I think it translates really, really nicely to both. So what am I talking about? I actually want to show you an example of a virtual presentation that I did recently. So 2 weeks ago, I was a guest on Ecamm's channel, and I was talking about how to interview guests. Honestly, it was kind of a complex situation because I was trying to show how do you bring guests into Ecamm, which is the streaming software I'm using right now to stream, and how do you bring them into Zoom? So I had a live Zoom call going. I had someone in Ecamm, but I was also using Ecamm to broadcast the live stream. There were a lot of moving parts. So let's take a look at my preparation. So if you're not aware, I use Notion to organize all of my content. This is from my content database. So this is a live page. And this is an entry in the database. And it specifically says Ecamm. Typically, my content is mine. But in this case, I was producing a live stream for Ecamm. You will see I've got some of my properties here. I keep some of the actions. Which brand was it for? I've done a couple for Ecamm Live. I've got my own, the status of the content, all of that. Description, this is from Ecamm's page. The link so I can easily access it. But down here, got my actions that I keep track of to prepare for a talk. On this page, so this is the body page of the Notion, I guess, database entry. And I have a few things ready. So first, I did actually have a checklist. I wanted to make sure I had everything ready before the live stream actually started. But down here, you'll actually start to see in my outline, I wanted to make sure that this ran really smoothly. And I started to use something. I'm actually going to increase the size of this a little bit. So if we increase the size, you'll start to see a little bit of the sidebar. I'm just going to modify that for a second. Okay, let's see if we can. Oh, no, it's locked. All right. So what I did here is I actually mapped out this talk in advance, and I used what we call code. So here you'll see scene, for example, is in inline code, meaning it's got a gray background and it's got red, although I can change this color. And I have the different things I was going to talk about at each section. And then over here, you'll see I start to actually have some different things, like I've got a red code here, but I also start to use some purple. So the way that I set this up is I was really giving myself speaking notes that had anything red had to do with me running this production, meaning prepare an overlay for this section, make sure that you're in demo mode for this section. But these purple codes, these are for me. And this was to make sure I know that I talk about preferences first, I talk about scenes, I remember to mention the tip for pressing Option and dragging. I also have the guest call. Here I have a red note saying, make sure you show the resolution in Zoom, have a scene for this, but also remember to talk about it. And so I've just got a few things down here. Over on these sections, I wanted to make sure that I had an overlay for one way, an overlay for two way, making sure I did a loop back demo. So you can see that I've got notes to myself about what to say, but also notes to myself of what to do. So this was a really, really helpful structure and format that I had ready for this talk. So that's one example that I wanted to share, but I also just wanted to kind of do a short demo of why Notion in particular is such a helpful tool for this, not just for the fact that you can, obviously you can change colors, you can change formats in many other, Word documents and processors or notes apps, but I think there are a few definite advantages to Notion. So let's talk about that. And I'm actually going to I'm going to do a new page. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to use the page that's already open. So let's go back to this Notion page. And actually, no, can you see this? I don't know if you can see this. So when I hover over here, yeah, you can see it. It's barely cut off. I can add a new page. I'm just going to add a brand new page to the space. I'm not showing you the whole workspace because I find the sidebar a little bit distracting. But let's add a new one here. And we can just start this fresh page. And let's say it's about today. So I'll say be presentation ready in Notion. Now this is just a regular page, which is also, as you don't have to have a database. You can literally just have a page for your presentation and just start to plan your presentation. One of the things that I really want to encourage you, I'm actually going to go back to my main camera for this because I think this warrants some focus. So if you've started multitasking, drifting away, come back to me. I really want to emphasize, I do not recommend that if you are using slides, don't start with slides. I used to do this and I don't do it anymore. And here's why. If I would start with slides, I would end up putting all the best stuff on the slides. The slides had all the best advice, all my best speaking points. It was basically me drafting an outline of my talk in slides. So what happens when I go to present? I basically just read the slides to people. That's useless. Slides should complement and enhance your presentation. Whether that's using visuals, whether that's repeating a key phrase, there are a lot of really strategic ways that you want to use slides. But what I see many people do is just draft their entire presentation in slide form and then maybe have some notes on the slides themselves of what else to talk about, and they've done all the work in there. What I do recommend instead, if you're using slides or another type of asset, first write it out in a written form, which I'll show you in a second. Then we want to organize it, decide, okay, how do I want to punctuate these key points so my audience remembers them, so that it has an impact, but you're not putting all of the stuff that you're going to say in your presentation, in your assets, in your slides. So I just want to say that. I really want to drive that home. All right, now let's come back to the demo. So being presentation ready in Notion. So one of the things I know that I want to share with you, so an example would be, let's talk about slides. So I might say in this presentation, let's make sure my cursor is where it needs to be. Don't prep your talk in slides. Maybe I want to say that. Maybe I want that to be a key point. So right now I'm just typing. This is me just adding a text block. Every single thing in Notion is like a building block, like Lego, and you can move these around. And you can also highlight these just like anything else. When you highlight it, you have the option to change. Maybe you want to bold. You can also use keyboard shortcuts, which big fan. And you can change the color. You can also, though, change it to something else. Maybe I want this to be a big heading or maybe a smaller heading. And I want to say, don't prepare your talk in your slides. If I want this to show up like you saw in the demonstration of code, I can highlight this. There are a couple of things. One, I can press this, mark as code, but hopefully you can see there's also a shortcut, which is Command E. So if I press Command E, it will turn to code. If I press Command E again, it will change. And maybe I want this to be a note to me because this is not about my presentation. And maybe I'll turn it blue. So I can do something like that right off the bat. So I'm just showing you one example. But what I'd actually like to do is show you a brainstorm. So what I like to do first is brainstorm what I want to do. So first, I want to make sure I tell you about how Notion is free. So I'll just do some bullets. So it's free. You can format. You can reorder blocks because everything's a block. You can keep all presentations or content in a database. That's really helpful. And you can also be in dark mode, so we'll talk about that. You can also use it on your mobile device, which I'll show you an overhead shot in a moment. And also I do love the, recreate or duplicate quickly with Option. Here's another trick. If you use this little guy, I don't even know what it's called. Does anyone know what that's called? It's also pretty small. If you put this and let's say I write Option and then I do it again, it turns into code. So that's another trick for really quickly while you're typing, you can actually start to type your code. So Option plus, and I'm going to do it again, drag. So I'm now creating code. So I'm really quickly highlighting what it is. But the reason I love just free form, adding what I want to talk about, is I can do this. I can reorder blocks. So maybe I don't want to start with the fact that it's free. Maybe that's actually just a bonus I talk about at the end. Maybe I want to talk about the fact that it's got mobile sooner. Maybe the first thing I want to say is that you can reorder blocks. And maybe this is more of just a nice to know you. So I'm just dragging these around and reordering them. I can also really easily add headings. So maybe the first thing I want to do is talk about preparation. So in Notion, you can use Markdown. We can use the slash, or we can say, heading 2, H2 will give you a heading. You can also use hashtag enter, and you get a heading. So maybe I want to talk first about prep. And this option drag, if I pull down option, drag, maybe I want to say here around format. So I'm just really quickly and nicely planning this out in a way that makes sense for me. When it comes to the code, for example, maybe dark mode is something I make sure I don't want to forget, because in this list, I might glance down at this list, but if there's something really important, first, let's make this bold, and then let's make it code, and then let's change the color. So maybe I want this to be blue. We'll just go with the blue. So here I'm starting to have these in different ways. And as you saw maybe here, I think this is a heading. Yeah, this is a heading. So you can have code in your headings if you want big mention to yourself. I know recently in a talk, I had something at the start, let's option and drag. I asked people, now this was in red. So let's change this to red. And I said, and I highly recommend this, it disappeared. So let's do this. Put device in do not disturb mode for 1 hour. Whoop. So I had that at the top of the page because I was talking about productivity and I wanted to make sure that we had people focused because I was talking about focus. And so I wanted to make sure that at the top of my notes, it was very, very clear of what was happening. Now I'm going to show you an overhead shot of my workspace right now because I want to talk about, well, first let's go to my main camera. When it comes to whether you are virtual or in person, you always want to make sure that you do have notes handy. Even if you are well practiced and you don't need to look at them, it is that nice sign of security measure or to be able to glance down, see maybe an important note to yourself about something that you make sure you want to say. I really like having, for me personally, a tablet is a really great option. And this is what I used last week when I spoke at a live event. It was really helpful and I'm also using it now. So let's take a look at my desk. So here, I've got my Ecamm set up here. I've got my teleprompter. That's where I'm looking when I look in the camera. But down here, you can see these are actually my notes for today. So I do have notes about today. What are the things I want to talk about? I can also see here, we've got the chat. So if I switch over here, I can see my stream health, etc. So I got my stream there, my demo here, and then I've got my actual show notes here. And you'll notice this is in dark mode, which is really nice if you don't want a big white screen reflecting at you. And if we go here, back to this demo, dark mode, so you can change this in your settings, but there is a shortcut, Command-Shift-L will actually turn it from light mode to dark mode. If you do it again, you can go back to light mode. I will caution if you use the app Loom, I have to turn off Loom in order for that to work because frankly, it uses the same shortcut. So you always want to test whenever you have a shortcut if it's going to interact and be different than another shortcut. But essentially, I actually really love the dark for if you are going to have this. So if we go back to my overhead shot, this is actually what I would prefer to have if I am reading notes. In this case, I'm doing a demo. I find usually that white background might be a little bit better. But as far as not wanting a big white screen going back at me, then that's really helpful. You can also see a view here. I do have the sidebar of pages I can easily access as well. So this is, this is what it looks like. This is a really simple example, but the things that I really wanted to emphasize is, well, as I said, and I'm going to get rid of these headings because they don't actually make sense necessarily. But I do love all these things that I've said here. You can easily reorder, drag these around. You can even make columns if you want to. If you drag a block beside another block and you see a little vertical line and you drop it, you've now created 2 different columns. So if I wanted to actually have some information in 2 columns, I could do that. Oh, that went into a tab. If I wanted to have maybe my priority things on this side in this column, and maybe the lower priority things could be in this column, I can just move those around. It's just a really dynamic tool. And I love that it's quickly accessible on mobile devices. I can have it on a tablet. I could look at it on a phone. Maybe you don't have a tablet and you just want to have something there that's ready for you. You can do that. Really, I do love the highlight. And I love that you can have these in headings, and I can change this. Maybe I want this to be really big. I can say, let's actually turn this into heading 1 and have this be huge in heading 1. I could absolutely do that. And that's one of the things that, I don't know, it might seem so silly that I love this so much, but I just love this so much. I want to acknowledge that in my past video, when I talk about preparation for workshops and getting ready for presentations, I showed an example of using a database where every entry of the database, it'll look like a table view, and you could see what's the section, how long is it, what interaction am I using, how am I engaging with my audience, what assets do I have to create. So I had that, and honestly, I still use that if I have to really watch my time. If I know I have an exact amount of time, I'm going to use something like that because it will quickly add all of the different times of the sections. I can move those sections around. I can also quickly reorder my speaking points, etc. But speaking notes, I actually really like seeing them in the page format. I really like being able to use some of this formatting. You can also use this formatting in a table. So let's do one more quick example and then I'll kind of wrap it up there. But if you're someone who actually likes a table, and let's go back into light mode. So I'm going to create a new block, and I'm just going to create an inline database, meaning there's a database on this page, and right now it's in a column. So let's drag it down. So I have this simple database, and this would be maybe my speaking outline. You can name it whatever you want. And so here I've got my intro. Here we'll say minutes. I'm going to change this property. And I apologize if I'm going quickly. This will be how much time it is, and this will be a number field. So this will be how many minutes. So I can say my intro is going to be 5 minutes. Then maybe I'm going to do a breakout room with this group, and this will be 4 minutes. What I can do here in the table view is I can actually have it total. What's the total time? So as I'm creating this, maybe the first topic is 15 minutes. I can start to plan it out. I still love this. I still use this. But let's say you like the table format. I can actually add a text field. Maybe I call this notes. And you can still use some of these features. So I could say here, turn off devices. I can use the inline code. I can also use Shift Enter to make a new line and say, call will be recorded. Now there are some limitations because I can't have headings in here, so it would be inline, but I can do the same thing where I can change this to a different color. So if I want this to be purple or red or whatnot, I can also make this bold if I want. So you can do things in your actual notes. You can have a wider section. So that is a possibility. But I would say if we go back a page to this example, just being able to see this in front of me and seeing this on my tablet for that live stream that I ran, that was incredibly helpful. And I also have this as part of my database. So I have all the other things about this database of the pre-show checklist. So this is an example that I could have a template button where every time I have a show, I can easily repopulate my checklist so I can know that I've got everything ready to go for that show. So hopefully this has given you some inspiration, maybe some ideas. Maybe if you haven't tried Notion, you'd be willing to try it just for making some of these notes, being able to reorder things, being able to put them in code, make them stand out. Honestly, I just love it so much. And I'm not ashamed. I'm an enthusiastic person. I love a lot of things. And this is one of the things that I love. My last thing, if you are making slides, is I would encourage you as you're going through, make your notes, organize everything you're going to say, and then go through and you can actually decide and put the word slide. I want to make a slide for this. That will help inform how you're going to complement and enhance your presentation using slides instead of just starting default in slides. But all in all, this is a free, accessible, flexible, customizable tool that honestly, it will help you to create more engaging and professional online presentations.